problem with most amateur golfers is you're too scoopy, and this basically just means that club head is overtaking the hands, adding loft, inconsistent contact, you know, lack of compression. The list is pretty much sort of endless, and what we're trying to do is get the hands forward so we can compress the golf ball, control the club face, control low point, etc, etc. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my setter position here, and then I'm going to remove my right hand, and if I sort of just, you can see from this setter position, if you drew a line through my lead forearm, the weight's at a different angle towards the club shaft, so that means there's a bit of angle between my forearm and the back of my wrist. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to sort of open up my hips. I'm going to shift the pelvis a little to the left, and I'm just going to trigger a little bit of hip rotation, a little bit of chest rotation, and also therefore just open my shoulder slightly. And what you can start to see is the way my wrist goes from a fairly neutral position where it started to a position where it's starting to introduce more flexion, or it's certainly starting to flatten it. So the first thing I'd say is that the reason why your wrist isn't flattening is quite simply because you are not shifting the pelvis enough to the left in the golf swing and triggering enough rotation to open up. Okay, because the main reason why professional golfers go from this position at address to this position at impact isn't because they're simply manipulating the wrist position. It's got nothing to do with that. The wrist position is being manipulated as a byproduct of the shoulder basically moving further away from its original position. So again, how is that happening? Well, what happens in the downswing is that the pelvis would shift to the left, and also when we sort of clear the hips out of the way, the left hip goes back behind you, so it tilts the pelvis. And as that pelvis becomes a little tilted, that shoulder's therefore going to go up. If I did this, it would go down. I do this, it goes up. So because my shoulder's going from this position to a position where it's slightly more upward in the sky and slightly more left of the target, therefore my lead wrist is going to flatten off. So if you are somebody who is desperately trying to introduce more shaft lean, the way you're not going to do it is by consciously trying to introduce more shaft lean, so to speak. It's going to happen as a byproduct of you producing enough movement of the pelvis in towards the lead side, which is therefore going to lend itself to also that hip depth, that tilting motion like so. So the way you want to practice this is you want to take your setup position, and then what you want to just work on is just getting the feeling, like from this perspective, that I'm just getting my hip, see the way I'm just moving this hip behind me to the point where I sort of just get that sense that my shoulder goes up a little bit. It's almost a little bit like a sort of sliding sensation, so it's a little bit of rotation, a little bit of movement towards that lead side. That pops that shoulder up, introduces that amount of shaft lean. That's the kind of feeling you're after to produce an impact position that's desirable. Think about the location of this. This is trying to go to the left in a slightly rotational way, to the left in a slightly rotational way. To most golfers that I work with online, when I do these exercises, they're surprised how much it feels more like a slide. But obviously when they get it, they're also impressed by the results. See you guys again really soon.